It's a time for each of the board members to share their thoughts and provide input, their initial reactions on the master plan. It's not anything final or anything like that. It's just as we read it, you'd share them with you, incorporate them into the process that we're going to go through over the next several weeks in terms of getting to a final plan. So it's a pretty straightforward agenda. Before we start, I just want to do two things. First, number one, I want to thank you for the work. It provides as I read through it, it provides a great foundation for not only to look at a master plan, but for us to have a policy and a strategy level discussion and get at some things that we need to get at, and it gives us something that we can move forward on, whatever that is. And then the other thing, I specifically want to thank you for recognizing the work that was done previously. We live in a in-the-moment society, and I want to just echo those thanks and publicly thank my predecessor, Mayor Gardner, Aaron Kirkpatrick, Joyce Blythe, Brett Diller, Sean Posh, and Mike Stewart for having the foresight to call for that original plan, get it completed, and also thank the managers, McLaurin, interim manager Maher, and Mr. Wood, as well as Natalie Jackson, the first director, for getting us started on this journey. And as you pointed out, a lot was accomplished, and sometimes we just need to pause and say thank you to all those that helped us get to this point. So I want to put that as a matter of record as well. So there's nothing scientific about this. We're going to go alphabetical. So Burns before Burl. So we'll start with Commissioner Burns, and just share your comments and go at it.
Well, as I was going through this master plan, and also thank you for the work you've done, Dina, I wanted to come down to start off with, I think this is a good plan, and it has given us a pretty good idea of what the citizens in Waxhaw want as far as parks, what kind of programs they want. The mini park, I'll start with that. The mini park, I think that the property over on Wysocki, or near Wysocki neighborhood, I think that would be a good, in my opinion, a good place to start as far as a mini park. There's not any parks on that side in that area, except for the downtown park. The second thing, I think, coming from the surveys, is the community park, which would be the 34 acres. I think that that piece of property is a parcel that could, it's just the size of it, the environmental save, as far as saving the environment and the open space, the green space is especially important. And the different things that could be done on that property is limitless. I mean, we've talked about these over and over again. And I'm thinking, as far as your financial piece coming down to how much it would cost, I've done some research and I've talked to another commissioner in Wesley Chapel. And you probably know who I'm talking about. I won't say his name, but you probably know who I'm talking about. And even without a Parks and Recreation department, they have developed a park. I think it's a 24-acre park that's beautiful. And other than paying for the land, most of the things that have been done in the park is through a Friends of the Park, 501(c). There's the Boy Scouts, donations from numerous different companies, work from the citizens, work days that comes that help to open that park. And I don't see why we can't do that here. I think it's really important to bring the neighborhoods, all of the citizens together, and give them an opportunity to help open that park. And as far as the financial piece, I understand that's a full build out of the entire park, but as far as doing that in stages, I would like to see a financial plan or a stage 1 plan just to get the locks off the gate. And that would be, of course, the cleanup with the barn, a entrance and an exit, a parking lot, and porta-johns. I don't think we have to spend the money to build a bathroom. We haven't done that with our other parks. We've staged it. And get that park to a place where it can be open to the public. And you'd be surprised at how many people will come forward, even to donate money. There's many people that I've talked to that would donate a lot of money to help the town. So I think that's really important. I have my questions here.
So you're on page 5 in the executive summary, right? That's where you started off with that? Okay, just double checking.
Is there a way that we could get an estimate of what just those basic things would cost, or do you already have that? I know you gave me some figures back some months ago.
We have done like the basic through what it costs for just to clean up, and we've got that kind of estimate. But that would, I guess, would be a board decision on if you want a master plan set to do stages. So because we need to know a plan ahead of time before, so we know where the entrance goes. We know, because we're that beautiful brickwork, I would hate to lose it, but the entrance probably wouldn't fit there. So we need to have a master plan for the park, and then we can do it in the stages as you set forth. So that's a CIP the way you want it laid out.
You're talking about an entrance and an exit, two separate. Why can't it have just the same
It can.
in and out?
But it needs to have, you need to
On the
have a
end.
plan to start off with, so you can
Yeah,
understand,
I understand that.
where it goes in, and when you go to phase 2, you know where everything's going to go. Doesn't mean that things like 10 years from now, it doesn't, you don't tweak it if we're at phase 3 by that time. But you need to have at least a concept plan of what you kind of want it to look like for infrastructure to go in. So you know where, you don't want to put a driveway where you know you're going to have to put a water line in it. It's just infrastructure. We need a basic plan for the infrastructure, and that goes into how y'all want to set up the CIP. Totally doable, but that's something this is showing the needs assessment that we're at right now. And you saw all of our wonderful surveys that our citizens want a park, and that we have land to put a park on. But again, that's after we get this adopted, that's that next stage. So
I understand.
yeah.
I guess my frustration a little bit is being involved over the years with the 10-acre or the Horton property downtown, of even getting to the whole layout for a park, and then nothing happens.
Well, that's another discussion that we're actually closer, because we do have at least a master plan for that park, but there's no CIP funds to fund it for the first stage. But that's totally where y'all would want to start at. But this is the foundation that we know what we're missing, and we know the national standards that they recommend, where we fall in it, and y'all have done such a wonderful job of land banking. We have the opportunity. It's just making sure that we have my workbook for us to move on. So it's one of those things, if you're feeling that documentation is missing, that's something that would help y'all make those decisions later on. That's the kind of thing, if you feel that something we need additional information in here to help you make those decisions. Also, if there's anything clarify that will help you, that's what will help us get this a little further along, so we can start the plan for our future.
Yeah, and that's the purpose of today, and everybody will get a shot at giving you questions, asking for clarification, et cetera. So,
I have more, but I'll come back.
okay. Commissioner Burrow?
Sure. First, I'm going to repeat what's been said twice already. Thank you. The master plan is really, it's a good piece of work, and I really appreciate the fact that, you know, it's built on the work of others, and you recognize that, and everybody gets to recognize that. So, you know, it's a work in progress. Having said that, I want to start at the end, and on section 5, on paragraph, the last paragraph on page 582. I have copies of this for you later. It states that elected officials will ultimately have to prioritize the steps they will take to meet some of these parks and recreation needs. It will take a combination of revenue sources to accomplish the recommendations of the master plan. And I agree, this is true, but revenue sources are only a small part of the information the staff must provide to the Board of Commissioners in order for them to make accurate and informed decisions. This master plan is a very good start, but only an outline of what must be done. The additional information I feel is necessary to make accurate, informed decisions is as follows and must be presented to the board in the context of an overall town budget. That's where you're talking about the CIP. I think that capital expenses must always be separated from operational expenses. I think for scheduling purposes, additional staff requirements must be identified now in order to project future needs. Again, Greg, and I have a copy of this for you.
Okay.
Areas of future development must be identified and evaluated. By that I mean East Waxhaw Parkway, the Pittenger property, the Francis property, the Howie property, things like that. Risk assessments must be prepared for all of these work elements. All projects must come with a pro forma and cost-benefit analysis demonstrating their value to Waxhaw. Revenue sources must be identified and verified. Projected tax base growth, land sales, user fees, partnerships, sponsors, grants, general fund, bond referenda, etc. Timelines must be established to perform each task. The degree of difficulty involved must also be identified. The apparent ripeness of each project needs to be indicated. The public's interest as expressed in our surveys must be demonstrated for each of these projects. The above will require a great deal of effort on the part of the town staff. The Board of Commissioners should not hold off until it is all complete. We, the board and the staff, should start on projects that are ripe. Finally, there needs to be a far greater and more formal emphasis on safety and security for the parks as well as for other town facilities. I have some specific comments. On page EX5, the last paragraph suggests we require developers to provide small parks. Perhaps, if legislatively allowed, we could develop a parks impact analysis ordinance similar to our traffic impact analysis ordinance. There is a very weak attempt at something similar to this in the downtown code section of the current Unified Development Ordinance. It uses the words like may or probably and things like that instead of must or shall. Page EX7, special use facilities. Question came to my mind, can the town partner with the YMCA to develop an aquatic similar to the one in Monroe? I've been told that Monroe Center pays for itself with user fees and partnerships. Just verify it, and that would be a good way to go. Page EX8, evaluate the utility of our currently owned town properties in conjunction with the Urban Land Institute report. Personally, and I sort of disagree with Commissioner Burns, I do not see a benefit in keeping the Waxhaw Monroe Road property or the Wysocki Park property. They lack parking and are remote. I think our efforts to develop those could be better spent on more viable parks. Horton, the 34 acres. I do not see a consistent inclusion of the green along the railroad tracks in the master plan. It's mentioned, sometimes it's in a chart, sometimes it's there, it's not. And it made me wonder who's in charge of the green. Parks and Rec, Public Works.
Team effort.
Yeah, in page 1-12, Union County may only offer limited park facilities to Waxhaw residents, but they have been very generous in donating land to us for park facilities, and I thank them for that. Union County schools have been more reluctant to allow joint use of their facilities, citing supervision, security, and maintenance needs. I think that Waxhaw's manager, our staff, and our police department are very professional and capable of resolving any such difficulties if given the opportunity. On the implementation plan, I do not see any facilities planned on the east side of Providence Road, either north or south. Page 2-39, last paragraph. Many users of the town's park and recreation facilities are not town residents. I can't offer an easy solution to this conundrum. The surrounding communities are probably, I'm going to assume, are not disposed to participate, but perhaps the county can be persuaded to see Waxhaw's facility as a quasi-county property and further partner with us in serving all of Union County's residents. They've done so far in land. And then there was a paragraph, a whole section on working with the state of South Carolina, and I'm just curious, how do you do that? I think it's a great idea, but what are the mechanics of that? Thank you.
One of the first points I came to was on page EX7. Under the 3 to 5 year priorities, it talks about completing H.C. Nesbitt, and the next one says land acquisition near Thornton property. It's my understanding that we have spoken to that landowner before and been rebuffed, and that they have had no interest in selling for the sort of money we're willing to offer. So I'm hesitant to put land acquisition, which is something out of our control, in our direct plan on such a specific location. We don't have the power to say today or tomorrow or later, yes, we will acquire that land. They have to be willing to sell it to us. So I'm just hesitant about the ownership of how that's our responsibility versus something we have no control over.
Just as a follow-up to that, maybe it would be good to clarify for the board what specific properties are you referring to?
That would be as helpful as well.
Yeah. We may be confused as to what you're talking about because there's several parcels down there.
Yeah, because the last thing we heard was from Natalie when she was here about that whole big area.
We also have in there land acquisition for the future community center. Again, I'm not sure where land would be available, what land is even an option. So if there could be a map showing parcels that are even up for consideration, that would be helpful, because if there is no land, then again, that would have to come out of the 3 to 5 year and be put on the back burner if there's really no option. If there is an option, then we should know what those options are. Town Creek Park, further down the page there, the last phase 5, creek repair and creek landing. What's the liability of us opening that creek and encouraging people to boat down that creek?
So that was on the phasing that was pre-me, and so that I just kept it on there.
Okay.
The liability of any creek is we will have to, we'll do our insurance like any, but a lot of parks already have creek landing, so we would adjust. The only thing with me is just cleaning up the creek, so that would have to happen before we can do.
Of course, yes.
Encourage anybody.
I would be curious what the costs are there, as far as to clean up the creek would be, I would imagine, more costly than other projects, and what would any insurance additional needs be? How does that play out as far as comparing it to other phases and other things cost-wise? Next tab. Page 1-33 talks about the Wasaki Park on one side and then the Waxhaw Marvin Park on the other. I did agree with, this is a good area. I liked the way you broke down sort of the first things that would need to happen. The barn structure would have to be dealt with. Parking and circulation. Restrooms, again, I would also agree with Commissioner Burns, would be something that could be phased in. Dogwood Park has porta potties behind a beautiful screen, and they're just now talking about this year and next year getting their plumbing. So that could all be phased. But I did like that you called out passive types of recreation here, because I think that's what that area is best suited for, is not a rec center, is not something else, it's passive recreation. So I did feel that that was the best use of that facility. On 1-35, again, it talks about property near the Horton property and a possible community center, and again, I would have the same questions. What property, what parcels are there even being referred to? Is there even a possibility? Do we have a first right of refusal? Can we get a first right of refusal? Have we already been told we're not interested in selling to town? On page 5-74, the section Park Foundation Operational and Capital, we go through some important discussions about how we fund this and the different.
I'm sorry, what page is that again?
This is 5-74. Key funding and revenue resources, park foundations. I think we would definitely need to be pursuing any and all possible funding sources that we can when it comes to opening new facilities. I've also spoken to some of the people involved in opening Dogwood Park and was amazed at how little they paid for and how much was provided as charitable donations, to find out that they paid for their parking, paving, a couple of paved trails, and the land itself, and pretty much everything else was done on donation, was amazing. And I know we have, you know, Boy Scouts chomping at the bit to do projects.
And we do have them.
So it would be great to see us get to a point where we could allow them to start doing some preparatory work at the 34 acres, so we could start taking advantage, even before it maybe can't be used by the public yet, but they could be involved in the prep stages of clearing or whatever we need as we get a site plan done. And we should definitely be pursuing grants, and if there's anything we need to get for you to make it easier for you to get grants, if we need to find, you know, someone to help write grants, if we need, what you need is what we want to give you, I would hope. Under the next page, 5-77, revenue opportunities, I also penciled in fishing licenses, because I know we can get, Fish and Wildlife will stock that pond, even though it doesn't need stocking, for free. They'll build a dock for free, so that we could do fishing there at the 34 acres, so that's possible another revenue source that could be added in, so I just penciled that in. And I really appreciated on 579 where you talk about park facilities as economic developers, because they really are. They draw people to a community. They draw residents, which makes companies want to come because they have employees that want to live there. Their economic value is more than just fees and licenses that they themselves provide directly. They have an indirect economic boost for a community. And I believe that was all of my major comments. Yeah, that's all I have for now.
Okay.
Did I go too fast?
Yeah,
Did I
just want to make
fire
sure I'm on
hose
the
you?
right page.
Did I fire hose you too much?
It's all good. That's the reason why I got orange, so I can see it.
Easy to follow. Commissioner Westlake.
I think, I guess to start out with, the thing that I see the most important, I'll go through and I'm just kind of getting a general thought right now.
All right, no worries.
When I looked at all of the surveys and the public sessions and all of that, and knowing overwhelmingly that the greenways and the trails is what stands out more than anything, I would like to see us focus more on a completion of a trail system. I'm not thrilled about having something done in each park every year. I'd rather see a completion before because it's kind of like when you're in a house and you do a little project in each room, it's like nothing ever looks complete. I kind of like the idea of completing one thing instead of doing little things in each area. So I'd like to see us complete that, because that would satisfy what the most residents are looking for, to complete the thread trail or a greenway system. The other thing overwhelmingly is a community center, things like the splash pad, and all of that can be incorporated into the downtown park area. And so that would be my choice for a second area to look towards completing. Now I know that the NRPA has certain recommendations and standards. I kind of look at this more overall, though, that we're not including what is in the neighborhoods, what is available at the schools. I mean, when my son played tennis, we go to the school's tennis courts, and like Millbridge does have a basketball court, even though it wasn't listed on here. It's serving a percentage of the population, even though it's not counted into our overall parks inventory. That the neighborhoods that have amenities, they are actually serving in some of these areas that we're showing a shortage of. So I look at things like the schools, the private, like we're going to be getting a Y, we're going to be getting, I know there's some type of gym or something being built over on Waxhaw Parkway. So I look at kind of overall that the residents do have opportunities for some of these areas that we're short, even though we can't technically count them in. And so that's why I'm trying to focus more on the things that the residents can't get from any other types of sources. So again, that's the greenway, the trail system, perhaps like a splash pad, the dog park, things like that. So that's where my focus would be. I know that we've put in there the water tower lot, and obviously we're discussing selling that. So, I mean, that does take away from some of the inventory. I know there's been some mention of some of the smaller parcels, the Wasaki. I'm also in agreement that seems to be a very difficult area to put anything in of use, really. I'm fine with the Waxhaw Monroe Road one being a dog park. That does seem like a good location to me for that. Let's see, I'm trying to think what else. But one thing as far as financing that I do want to point out that on, it's EX9 in here, is that the acceptance of this document does not imply approval of funding for improvements, or that, that everything in here is going to happen. And I just want the residents to know that even if we approve this plan, that there's no guarantee that it's going to be done, because we still have to find the funding sources for this. And at this point, we have other things that are in the future that we're going to need to be funding, and such as town hall, public works, things like that. So it's going to be hard for us to find funding to get all of this completed that's in the plan here. And so I just want everybody to understand that just because we're passing this doesn't mean that it's a guarantee. So trying to see if there's anything else that I missed that nobody else has mentioned. But I'm definitely in favor of completing the downtown park area first. I think that's all I have right now.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'll give you mine now. And I got scribbles, and I'll wait till you get done with your little Post-it pad.
I'm writing as fast as I can.
Do you want another color?
No, I'm saying nothing.
So first, again, thank you. You've given us an opportunity to try to do some good. I mean, yes, it's a big price tag for us but that's what we have to look at. How do you bring these things forward for a town? I'm going to just go through the pages. So EX4, you say we have a good Parks and Recreation Department. I think what would be helpful, not to answer now, but if you have some metrics on how we can measure how we're doing, that we can use consistently, that would be great to bring that forward and incorporate into the plan. For me, some of these standards were the first time I've ever seen stuff, but I think if we're going to ask the town for and show the town that we're going to be spending a lot of money, we ought to have some metrics that show we're giving them something. That's the first thing I had. Same page, you use the word typical when you define the standards. Similar to Commissioner Westlake, I struggled just a little bit with that. One of the things that previous boards have done very, very well on in conditional use plans is they included residential development, residential parks, trails, common space, recreational amenities, etc. That's privatized. That's not ours. I get that, but you aren't going to get anybody out of my neighborhood to go use a park that they already have in their neighborhood. And whether the reality is that 65% of the population that we have today that has some form of an amenity. So my way of thinking on that is they have private recreation, but what's not on the plan is really south of Pine Oak and east of 16, including the downtown park. And so there appears to be an underserved when you factor that in. I just ask that you look at that just to make sure we're balancing it. That said, the priority, the 1 to 3 and the 3 to 5, I thought that was a great list. Yeah, we got to manage and we got to figure out what we have to do there in terms of funding, et cetera. But there isn't anything on there that I would say, maybe with the exception of some of the land acquisition, but certainly all the existing, we've got to work on, get it planned out, and get moving on that. 34 acres, and this popped up on EX6, EX9, and EX10. You define it as a community park. I agree completely with that. A master plan, and not a master plan like this, but a plan for it is critical, and get it done. We need to define it, because as I looked at your financial, I was struggling with, is that a real number, given that some of the smaller parks cost more? We're never going to be able to answer that. We'll just end up endless debates and going in circle. So the sooner we get to what that really is going to be, so we know, I would build that into the plan. The comment about Wysocki, I probably was leaning towards no, and then I made the mistake of going to the COG conference on Friday, and the keynote speaker was up there talking about how do you make your community a story. And he talked about, you take these small parks like the Dare Steel, like Wysocki, etc., and you make it an environment where people are proud of it. You may not be able to use it as a park, but you use it as something that promotes what you're really about as a community as you go from neighborhood to neighborhood. So I backed off of that. I think it really needs, probably in a different way to say it, really need to know what we're going to do with it. You know, is it a flower garden? Is it this? Is it a that? And we have to think out of the box and say, redefine what a park is. But I probably wouldn't have had that opinion if I hadn't gone to that keynote event and just listened to the guy talk about how you can change the attitude in a town by taking some of these small spaces and make them about the story of the town. Let's see, mission. I think one of the things we as a board, not necessarily for this document, but we as a board and with the manager and the director, we need to come back and actually provide you with more clarity. What's our expectation? This is really out in page 350, but what's our expectation on privatization and partnerships, and how far do we want you to go to build yourself or to buy from outside resources or partner, et cetera? We've never had that discussion as long as I've been on the board. We scrambled to get a department in place because, and we've never stepped back and said, where do we need to give you some policy help? So my overall recommendation there is to, let's make a list of all the policy decisions that need some clarification on. We might be halfway there, we might not be there at all, but let's get that stuff done, because that's where we can help, and we can also define outcomes as well.
You said
wrote-
350?
That was on 350 in the mission. I kept reading the mission, and I just said, you know what, we haven't helped you. That's how I looked at it.
Okay.
All these, it goes without saying, we have a great resource at the League of Municipality, the Risk Management Services team, and as we're looking at these things, evaluating these things, let's make sure we're engaging them so they can do the proper risk assessment. The insurance is the byproduct of that, absolutely, but they can also give us help on the front end to make sure that we're doing things that's the least riskiest way, if you will. Work with others. We need to flesh out our partnership strategy. We have, and as we look at fields, I hesitated to say, hey, I'm good with that number, because I think we need to ask the WAA and the Y just exactly what's your plan for the next 5 to 10 years? How many are you going to grow? Or have you grown, and does that mean as we add fields, we have to take some of that on? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what the capabilities are, but I think we need to be asking those questions as we look at the fields. That was somewhere in 4-64, 4-65. I too picked up on the economic development linkage, very strong. Encourage you to go, and I'll try to get the name. The outdoor recreation industry is growing, and North Carolina is number 6 in consumer spending in outdoor recreation. And North Carolina is one of the 11 states that have an outdoor recreation position funded by the legislature that helps with some of the economic development. 10 activities are included that we do 5 of them. There's got to be something that we can reach there and get some help from the state and that department to say, hey, where can you help? How can you help? That kind of stuff. And then obviously, goes without saying, we got to flesh out the organizational and operational recommendations. We can't just let it happen. We got to figure that out. You list 5 areas in there. If you do the staffing on those 5 areas, that's a big chunk of people over the next 5 to 7 years that we would have to consume within our operational budget. And obviously, Greg and Lisa know how to do that. It's just a matter of we have to figure out, let's get the mission right and say where we want you to partner or not, and then take it from there. But those were the general comments and specific comments page by page, and I'll give you my sheet after I take all my scribbles off. And last but not least, make sure we reach out to the team working on the revised UDO. Make sure we have those commitments that Commissioner Burrell alluded to. We did it in the old plans. Let's make sure we're doing the same kind of thing in the new to make sure we're getting the commitment from common areas. I mean, one of the things that sold us on our house, I live right across the street from a trail in a what would you call a neighborhood park. It's within our neighborhood. We've opened it up. It's beautiful, and it's a beautiful environment to be in, so let's make sure we're doing that. So those are mine. Now, how do you guys want to, you read through all those Post-it notes quick.
No. It's going to take me a minute.
Comments, what would you like, what is your reaction?
Commissioner Burns, did you have any others? You passed on, so I was just making sure you
they
were
got
covered.
'em.
Okay. No, I thought that they were all well thought out comments and observations, and a few that I had never heard before on things we put in the plan that you all felt was worthy of being in there. So that means somebody's actually reading it. Quite often we'll present these and everybody nods and they ask a few questions and they vote it in, and then 5 years later wonder why they had the document to begin with. So I guess one question I would have, because we've talked about the CIP, the projected CIP we put in there, do you feel that needs to be a part of the document or not? Oftentimes we leave it out. Some communities want to have something in there, but then they don't want to be committed to numbers, and certainly don't want to confuse folks down the road. It could be, something separate, and we could just leave it out altogether.
Well, it's kind of hard to gauge if the numbers are really accurate. I mean, like I said, we found out how much Dogwood got from donation, but you can't count on donations, but maybe you can get them. So it's hard to look at the numbers and go, is that really what it's going to cost me? Because we really won't know until we start looking at those funding.
There's still a cost.
Yeah.
Just it may not come from the town. As I remember Dogwood, because I did do their PARTIF grant a few years back, so I know they got a PARTIF, but they used other sources and grants as their matching funds. So yes, they didn't have to put out a lot of money to get that initial park in.
It still costs.
It still
them.
costs. So just knowing what that target is helps when you're putting those grant applications together, or going out and speaking to folks you hope are going to donate their time and their services or a few dollars.
I personally don't have any problem with it being in there. I think maybe you can strengthen a little bit that you did it based upon 2019 values and where those are, because 2 years from now when somebody picks it up, the costs are going to be different, and maybe make sure that guidepost is in there. The thing that I would take out, because I think people will react to it because it's open to strictly personal interpretation, is the list of what the neighborhoods have. Every neighborhood would look at that differently. Every person in a neighborhood would look at that and say, I don't agree. I either agree or I don't agree based upon how they view their neighborhood.
I agree, and a lot of people that I've talked to in the neighborhoods, they say, we paid for this in the price of our house and our HOA fees, leave it out.
So I think it's a good reference for all of us to have, but in terms of being in the document, and I know you provided it here for us, I'm not sure I'd include it because it's your representation and interpretation of a neighborhood, which is fine.
Well, it shows the needs assessment of the whole town. So
you did good. I mean, but in terms of when this goes final is all I'm getting at. What's everybody else think? The numbers.
Personally, I think having the numbers in there is a very good start. Whether they're 100% accurate or not, you've got a placeholder. And as I said in my comments, I think the real place for all that is when you, this year, next year, the year after that, have the opportunity to flesh out a budget that's got all these parts and pieces in it. And you'll have real numbers. But it's a good start. I'd leave them alone.
We can put a better clarifier on that, just to how we came up with those numbers. Some are, based on real estimates that we know of for parks that have been on your plans for a while. Others are based on typical parks that we do, and we know what the current numbers are and the projected costs. But
well, I mean, it sets the expectation that we're not talking about a couple $100,000. We're talking about multiple millions of dollars, whether it's all, whether the 34 acres costs this much or not, whether Horton costs this much or not. We're talking about those kind of dollars over the years for new and operation and everything else.
And maybe the simple link is for the latest CIP plan, go to the town website, something like that. So these numbers are constant, something like that, where you're tying them back to whatever the current year CIP is or whatever. I think that would help, or current budget. Tracy, Commissioner Westlake. Sorry.
I mean, I think it's good to give the residents an idea of how much it's going to cost to do all the parks. But I do agree there needs to be some type of disclaimer about it.
It's going to change.
Yeah, there's no guarantees on anything. And then again, I'm a little hesitant just on a couple of the things that are in there, like you were talking about the land acquisition or the water tower park. I mean, I don't know if we want to, because we don't, those may not even be in there at that time. So I don't know does that matter or
does what matter?
If that's in there, and then if we end up selling that property or.
So my recommendation would be that if you're comfortable leaving the language that the board should consider additional land, that you not get too specific, because that tends to tie the board's hands to a particular parcel. And while we know that there are parcels that would make nice additions to certain properties, we may not want to be very specific as to what those are, to the point that there may have been some discussions in the past that the door might seem closed today. Was also noted, just because it's in the plan that we should consider it doesn't mean there's any guarantee that it will ever happen, but it leaves that as an option. And it might not be a parcel that we typically think
Right.
is the next piece
Right.
to fall. It could be the third or fourth piece, and there becomes an opportunity to buy that third or fourth piece because of something that happens. And that really could reconfigure any of our parks, and I'm not talking necessarily just about the downtown park, but certainly the downtown park, things could change around with it in the way even the master plan was laid out. Something could change the size, the uses, the access points that would, in some cases, maybe make that overall master plan more affordable. It may make it more costly, but still says there's a value to having the downtown park, that we're still looking at what the future build out is, but that there should be some consideration if there's an opportunity to certainly look at it closely at that time. And I think that's the other point I would say is this is a plan and it's a guide. It is not a guarantee. I think that point's been made a couple times. It's giving you a needs assessment and the public a needs assessment, which is what would it take in a well-rounded community, full service, based on some national standards that we can agree approximate what we'd want to provide or as adjusted, but it doesn't really say that tennis is more important than hiking. That's a decision for each of the future boards to make in that budget process to figure out this year finishing a trail may be more important than tennis, or it might be more important than disc golf or whatever, because there may be, I think a term that was used was ripe. There may be ripe opportunities to partner. There may be ripe opportunities for land acquisition through the development process. And so that's going to be each year one of those discussions for the CIP from a funding standpoint, and then also from operational and staffing standpoint. So the big document gives you the flexibility to identify those needs that the survey said were needs, that feedback from residents said were needs. There's some things that didn't really make the plan, and I think that's not a bad thing, because in 5 years or 6 years this plan will probably be updated again. We will have a new census at that time. That's going to drive the number of facilities and probably the type of facilities, because we'll have new residents coming in with new needs. So that's just another kind of important thing to remember and think about. We'll be back to this point probably in 5 years looking at a refresher of this plan, and it'll get adjusted.
And along those lines, Greg, and I didn't mention this, but 239 and 240, where you highlight two other factors that influence the community's needs for parks and recreation facilities, gets right to your point, Greg. It's the users. Many users of the town parks are not town residents. That's number one. And then number two, the second factor, we live in Charlotte, the southwest corner of Union County, but adjacent to Indian Land, all three experiencing growth coming in. So by default, this is going to change over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years as we see what that impact is. And to me, that gets to how do we really, some policy decisions around what do we really think about fees and things like that start to drive. Are we serving the region, or are we going to take some other strategies there? That's a policy decision that this board and future boards are going to have to get their head wrapped around to help you.
And we still haven't even been able to have an audience yet with Indian Land. I've been trying to get up with Lancaster County Parks and Rec, and we just never can make the schedules work. But just to talk about all the things going on or that are planned in that corner, that goes back to Commissioner Burrell's comment about working with the state of South Carolina. It may not be so much working with the state as much as it is with the counties and the communities to partner up, like you've done with the Thread Trail, to be able to connect first thread trail in the system that goes across the state line.
When they see value, they'll move. Others, John.
Let's see, I was just going down my long list here. And some of the things I can probably answer. I will go and check with Monroe again, because I'm doing a couple of things over there with Tanya, but to my knowledge, the Aquatic Center is still an enterprise fund, and everything that supports that, everything from salaries to maintenance to all the expansions that they keep going through, and they're going on another expansion plan right now. And plus we're connecting that to the Williams Park with a greenway trail, because that's been hot button over there. So, but I'll double check on that, because we've used that as an example numerous times, because it's just hard to believe. It's sort of pie in the face to the Y, who turned them down back in 2002, whenever that was, and said, you're not the right fit for us. And then they went out and did what they did without needing to partner with the Y. That's kind of an amazing thing. And we've seen that in some of the mountain communities too, where they've gone out and had to do that just to build those facilities. I can see both points, I think both points well taken on Wasaki and the dog park. I can go either way, but if we're keeping land and wanting to use it, it's not necessarily, there's also, you have to look at the value of, what do we get if we sell the land? They're not, particularly Wasaki, there's not a whole lot to be gained by probably unloading that little triangle there. And I was able to have a conversation at the Park and Rec Directors Conference with Dave Malcolm, who I think headed up your TAP study. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about the green and the downtown and the opportunities there for it to be that whole corridor to be a park green space to drive that whole development as well. So there's probably a few more things we can even put into the plan on that, and he and I were even going to get together, and we hadn't had a chance to do that, to talk a little more about the study that ULI did and how it impacts the parks, because depending upon what comes down the pike with respect to the water tower and some of the other properties down there, and that's why we folded them in too, is that it could make economic sense, it could make recreation sense, which is an economic driver. So that's why we've left those things in there. So it's still in the plan. You may look at it 3 years from now and decide it doesn't need to be there anymore, but for now it's an important piece.
I will tell you that when we received the award for Great Main Street 2018, what was highlighted at both presentations was the green parkway down by the railroad tracks as, hey, you guys got it right. You guys knew what to do to promote, with a park, economic development across from the park. And that was unsolicited, but they pointed that out each time when they made the presentation. So
we've highly suggested that this plan be reviewed yearly, if not twice a year, and to go back through the accomplishments and see if things change in terms of priorities, not only with the Park Advisory Board, but with the town board. Just, you guys are a fast-moving community. There's always something being planned and something coming into town, and getting ready to embark on a big road widening coming down 16, which will have a big effect. So, as Greg mentioned, there's things that are going to change and move around, and that's why this is still a fluid document. And so that's an important part of this, is to keep revisiting it and make that way people don't have to dust it off, because the dust never gathers on it. You're constantly looking.
Yeah, and that's why I asked the question about metrics, because it's easy to say, hey, every year we spent this much money and completed this project, but what does it mean to the community other than we completed work? The more we can come up with some common ways to communicate the value Dina and team are providing, not only as we complete the projects, but as we move the Park and Rec Department and our whole strategy forward, and so the town sees value, I think that becomes important. We change the conversation. It's a great story to tell. We get wrapped up in projects, but it's a great story to tell when they
And one of the things I can do, one of the appendices, I think it's the second one, will be all the data we pulled out of the workshops that we did. And so we got a lot of feedback that wasn't even part of any of the survey work. And we can pull some of those quotes out because there are several in there that talk about why they want to use Waxhaw. And that'll all be in there
Okay.
as well. That little binder you have will be much bigger.
Space?
You might need bigger.
Okay, good.
It's a lot of extra.
It's just trying to combine a lot of what has been done and making it sort of in one place of the
See,
current
by
plan.
not giving us all of the appendices, you got us to read the main document. Because if you would have given us all, we probably all would have like, what do we have here?
You've read all the rest of it before.
It just gives it, also, it's one place, so once it goes searching, everything we need is in there, and it's going to be, that's going to help me do my job better.
So now you're going to go talk with the Park and Rec Advisory Board, and they're going to provide their reaction as well?
Next Wednesday is our Park and Rec meeting, and so they're been encouraged to write their notes down just like on with
Good.
y'all. And so we'll consolidate all that, and then we'll have hopefully one more meeting to kind of bring it all together, and then come back for a vote. Then we're ready to go.
Careful what you commit to. I'm just kidding you.
I
No, this is
don't
good.
know.
You guys,
It's like
this
you-
has been great work. Does anybody else have anything they want to add?
I'm hoping Brenda will be able to just send in notes or,
If Brenda can provide notes. I mean, she and I have had a couple of one-on-ones at the workshops. I've got previous concerns down, but obviously I don't have what she pulled out of the plan, so.
I don't know if maybe if you could forward those to the rest of us, what she sends in to you, or.
I don't think we could have made this plan possible without all of your involvement, particularly on the public side and being out there and willing to attend meetings and talk with us. That's quite helpful and beneficial.
Do you have more, Greg? Anything else you want to add?
I just want to compliment the board and the staff. I think this is a good demonstration of how these plans should work, and I am very pleased with the feedback and comments and lack of interest and participation, and I think it will help strengthen the final plan that comes to you for adoption. The Park and Rec Commission's feedback on it will be valuable as well, but we're getting further down that path to a good broad-based plan that'll then give this board some context and budgetary decisions to come. And so I'm very pleased with where this is at this point in the process.
Any final comments from me? Thank you both. Thanks for making time and sharing your frog with us. You know, we're always a pleasure to see you. And with that, we will adjourn the work session. Thank you very much. See you in an hour.
Thank you all.
Thank you.